Well, and good morning. I'm Richard Aborn. I'm president of the Crime Commission. Thank you all so very much for being with us. And as I increasingly say, thank you, of course, to old friends and a hearty welcome to new friends. I hope you stay with us as we go through this up and coming year, which will be an interesting and challenging one. I guess regrettably, and this morning I have to start on a somewhat somber note. As you all know, we lost a warrior for justice when Ken Thompson passed away, both unexpectedly and in a life way too short, way too short. But in that short time, he did so much for so many and really helped keep redefining the role of the prosecutor in pursuit of that ultimate and sometimes impossible to grasp role of achieving justice. I am confident, because I know the team that's come in his absence, in his passing, that his good work will be continued, that his vision will be continued, and that office will continue to grow and thrive in the way it's been doing. But it is a terrible loss, of course, for his family, but for all New Yorkers. So may I ask you all to rise, and may we have a moment of silence for Ken? Thank you all. So to transition from that somber note to a far more happy note, I do want to do, and those of you who are with us a lot know I say this at every single event, do what I love to do the most, which is to thank people. And I certainly want to start out with Howard for sponsoring this morning, and to your phenomenal team that runs Sea Level Cafe. They are the consummate professionals. It is fantastic. Now, I shouldn't say this publicly, but I will tell you, I'm telling you privately, nobody can hear me. People now say to me, we're going to Sea Level, right? Nowhere else. And it works out really well. So I'm going to introduce Howard, who in turn is going to introduce the new police commissioner, Jimmy O'Neill. As I have said at the last meeting when Bill Bratton was with us, I simply couldn't be happier that the mayor chose Jimmy O'Neill. I think he is just the absolute perfect choice for this position. It was certainly not an easy choice. There is a top-rank, top-flight team of senior executives in the PD, professional to the ninth, every single one of them. But I think the mayor made a very, very good choice, and I think New York is in very strong hands, and I think Jimmy is very well positioned to move us forward into some interesting new areas. To introduce him, I'm going to introduce Howard. Many of you have heard me talk about Howard over, I guess, a couple of years now at these events and other events. And it's always a great pleasure, and frankly, it's always a bit of a challenge. It's always a bit of a challenge because he does so much for so many. I can't keep encapsulating everything because I'd be up here for an hour. But I do want to go in a direction that I haven't gone before, and you have no idea that I'm going to say this, so I hope I don't embarrass you. If I do, we'll talk about it later. Howard's work in the arts community and in the scientific community, particularly in the medical research community, has been well chronicled, and I've talked about it quite a bit. I mean, among many, many things, he has now established probably what has to be the premier blood center, and particularly blood research center in the United States, the New York Blood Center, which is fantastic work, and is there when the most horrible things happen, as well as being there on a day-to-day basis. And we've talked a lot about the other work that he does to support medical research, and again in the science, in the arts and in culture. What, ironically, and I'm not quite sure why this is not, I think, widely known, and I think is actually both very important and very relevant to today, because this actually ends up being a connecting tissue between you two, is the work he does for those of us who are the least fortunate members of society, often the people in society who get overlooked. Now, there are a couple of high-level examples that you know about. When he helped the first responders in the wake of terrible natural tragedies, when he helped customers of the bank who lost homes in a natural tragedy. And he does those things spontaneously. Nobody asks him. He just thinks about them because he's always thinking about people, and he acts. And that's one of the great things about Howard. He links philanthropy and action. Sometimes you get philanthropy, sometimes you get action. You don't always get the two together, and Howard is all about making it happen. But the area where I want to really talk about and make this connection is the work he does for people who just need a leg up in life. And principally, it's in communities of color. And it's really important because Howard, at its core, understands that everybody can make it if given the equal chance. And sometimes some people just need a bit more of a lift than others. And he is there to do that, and that is important. So he donates to organizations like the Boys and Girls Harbor Institute in Harlem, DC College Access. If modern life isn't about college, I don't know what it is. A college degree now is the equivalent of what a high school degree was. The Harlem Educational Activities Fund, the Kids Are Our Future, and of course PAL. He's been a strong supporter of PAL. You all know PAL for many, many years. This is very important work, and it's not noted. But the other work that he's doing in this realm is something that is also not widely known and is increasingly important, but is about to become more widely known, is that he has been the sponsor of an important series on PBS, part of which has been shown and part of which hasn't, a series that is written, produced, edited, and narrated by Dr. Gates at Harvard, Skip Gates, a well-known intellectual in American life, particularly around black issues. There are two parts to this series, one of which has been shown, The African American Experience, Many Rivers to Cross, and a series that will be shown called Black America Since MLK and Still I Rise. So why do I mention these two things? Howard's always sponsoring events. Howard sponsored an event Sunday night to show some clips from the second series, which has not yet been aired. It'll be aired in November, Black America Since MLK and Still I Rise. And in Howard's remarks and in a subsequent discussion after the film, a discussion that has some pretty notable African Americans there, Congresswoman Horton, Michael Eric Dyson, Dr. Calvin Butts. There was a theme that emerged, and it was a theme that Howard had talked about in his opening comments. And it's the theme of hope. It's the theme of hope. In fact, a number of times in the discussion, a couple of panelists, including Skip Gates, referred to Howard as Brother Milstein, and I knew he had arrived. And it shows you the level of intimacy that he has with the African American community in New York. And it's really this concept of hope that really linked Jimmy O'Neill, it linked Bill Bratton, and it links Howard. Because if you think about the promise of Bill Bratton and Jimmy O'Neill, it's really to bring hope to our city, and because this is New York, to the country, that our city can be safer and that our relationships with our communities, between communities and government, communities and law enforcement, can be much more tightly bound and become highly functional, supporting a better life for everybody in the city. That's their promise. That's the hope they provide. And most importantly, they perform on the hope, because empty hope is not enough. Howard does the same thing. Howard provides that hope very often to people that I think sometimes don't even know you're doing it. And he doesn't seek the public acclaim for it. But he knows there's a need, and he responds to it. So he not only provides the hope, but he provides the action. And ultimately, that's what this is all about. Those in government, those in the not-for-profit community, particularly those in policing, and particularly those in philanthropy. It's about replacing despair with hope, but then going to the next step, which is performing on that hope and actualizing it. And Howard, that's something you do every single day in your life. I'm personally deeply appreciative. I know everybody in this room is. May I ask you to introduce the new police commissioner?
Well, I think Richard stimulated a lot of hope in this room this morning, and I think everyone was hoping he'd stop talking about me. But on a more substantive level, It is a great new series, Skip Gates, Martin Luther King, MLK, and Still I Rise, so look for it on PBS. So thank you for those wonderful words, Richard, on a more serious note. You know, you're certainly part of so much that I do, so you get a lot of thanks too. I'm delighted to welcome James O'Neill as our new police commissioner. Of course, he's not new to either New York or the NYPD. The Transit Police, where Commissioner O'Neill was a lieutenant, merged with NYPD in 1995, just around the same time we started many of our programs with the NYPD. It was a time in which the doormen in 500 buildings that we managed were enlisted to work with the police as their eyes and ears, where crime had started to rise on the Upper East Side in the early 90s. It was a time when we were enrolling residents in the Combat Auto Theft program and starting to help NYPD with technology upgrades and trainings. There were DARE trainings and community council breakfasts. In the wake of 9/11, we worked with the NYPD, leading the COPE campaign, providing first responders and their families with much-needed post-traumatic shock counseling. For the past couple of years, we've led a challenge to support NYPD's International Liaison Unit, our front line in protecting the homeland from terrorism. Over the past 25 years, we've always found ways to partner with the NYPD. I mention all this because it gives us great confidence to know that we've got someone at the helm who's been a part of NYPD's evolution for a long time. A Brooklyn boy, Jimmy O'Neill attended John Jay College, where he received his master's degree in criminal justice. He's served as a commanding officer at 3 very different police precincts. During his time as a CO, Commissioner O'Neill focused on a strategy that would become a hallmark of his career: expanding community outreach efforts, building relationships and trust in order to fight crime. Commissioner O'Neill's success at the precinct level led to several promotions, and he moved to the investigative side of NYPD, serving in the Vice Division, Narcotics Division, and Fugitive Enforcement Division. In 2014, Commissioner O'Neill became Commissioner Bratton's second in command as Chief of Department after being appointed Commanding Officer and Chief of Patrol. As Chief of Patrol, Commissioner O'Neill introduced the Neighborhood Coordination Officer Plan, something the Crime Commission was proud to work on with him. This plan allows officers to be proactive in the community and build strong relationships with the public, thereby helping to problem solve and fight crime at the grassroots level. Commissioner O'Neill has already hit the ground running in his newest role. His neighborhood-based policing model is being implemented in half of the precincts around the city, as well as NYPD Housing Bureau. The program is the gold standard for combining meaningful community engagement and crime fighting. The Citizens Crime Commission was involved in the NYPD's reboot of the Community Relations Program under Commissioner Bratton and continues to be a proud partner in Commissioner O'Neill's neighborhood-based program. We look forward to working with Commissioner O'Neill on many fronts to ensure our city is safe and that the community and law enforcement can work together to even further reduce crime and make our city safer than ever. At a time when there's so much distrust of police, sometimes justified, sometimes not, I would say usually not, the neighborhood-based policing model is the right approach for rebuilding the all-important partnership between New York communities and all the police who are charged with protecting them. Clearly, we've got the right man at the right time to build on the success of his predecessors and to take NYPD to new heights. Commissioner O'Neill, I'm sure everyone would prefer to hear from you as soon as possible. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So I just thank you for that very kind introduction. I just have to straighten out the record. I have a master's in public administration, and I'm not bragging because my older brother John he's a lawyer, and my younger brother Hugh got his master's degree in business administration, and they make fun of me all the time. So Richard, thank you for this, and Howard, thank you for sponsoring this great breakfast. I need to talk about something real serious right up front. the first week of my administration, I was invited to go over to the Daily News editorial board and sat down with Arthur Brown, and we spoke about a number of topics. Can everybody hear me? Everybody hear me okay? A little bit more? How's that? Better? Yeah? Okay. So I went over and spoke to the Daily News editorial board, and we spoke about a number of topics. And at one point, Arthur Brown asked me, he said, "So, Commissioner, with all these videos you're seeing from across the country, all these incidents happening in Minnesota, Baton Rouge, a number of places throughout the United States, how do they make you feel?" And it was a very pointed question. And I've been in this business a long time. I think people are probably sick of hearing me saying how long I've been a cop, but almost 34 years. And I told them I found them very disturbing and I was very distressed. And last night, up in the Bronx, while there was no video, or doesn't appear to be any video at this time, we had one of those cases. We had a woman, a person in crisis, where we were called to help. We ended up taking the life of 66-year-old Deborah Danner. That's not how it's supposed to go. It's not how we train. Our first obligation is to preserve life, not to take a life that can be avoided. When it happens, we need to know why. My commitment as police commissioner is to find out what went wrong and why. My commitment to the people of New York is to find out why, to be as transparent as possible, and to follow the process we have to investigate to get answers wherever they take us and take whatever action is appropriate. We don't do that alone. We do that with independently elected prosecutors who oversee the process. What is clear in this one instance? We failed. I want to know why it happened. It's not enough to say that in the vast majority of cases we get it right, because any one life lost is a precious life. My commitment is that we'll get to the answers. I've been a cop for most of my adult life. And cops know there's one thing you know when you become a police officer. You are 100% accountable for your actions, everything that you do. One thing I can tell you is that I've never known a cop who put on his or her uniform at the beginning of a shift and said, "I'm going to take a life I don't have to." And when a life is taken, as one was last night, we have to ask tough questions. That's who we are and who we must be to all the people in New York City. Just, Richard, and thank you for that really kind introduction, and good morning again, everyone. And thank you for all you do through this lecture series and in other ways to promote the vital works of the Citizens Crime Commission. Let me congratulate Richard Aborn on his outstanding leadership of this organization, and just not of this organization, for everything you do for the NYPD. Richard was instrumental in helping us put together our gun violence suppression division. And he came to me with an idea, and we ran with it, and I'm looking forward to very good things, and it's fruitful already. If you look at the level of violence in the city, homicides are down, shootings are down. I've been going in CompStat since 1996, and I think a few people in this room have been going even before me. And to think that we can continue to keep driving crime down is absolutely amazing. And it's because we have new and fresh ideas. And Richard, thank you for that. And Jimmy Yesick, I know, thanks you too, and all the people working in that division. And I know the people of New York should thank you also. He and the Commission continue to be a terrific asset to the New York City Police Department. And I'm eager to lead our organization with your continued partnership. And thank you, Howard. Thank you once again for this wonderful breakfast and all you do for the city. And it's great to see Judge Brown. It's always a pleasure to see Judge Brown. When I was a young lieutenant running the Manhattan Warrant Squad, I had a off-duty police officer, Charlie Davis, was working for me. And it was a Saturday morning. Charlie was making some extra money for his family, and he was brutally murdered in Queens. There were 4 arrests made, and I got summoned to come down to Chief Brown's office, and we had a frank discussion about capital punishment. Prior to that, being a young guy, did put some thought into it. Always thought that I wasn't pro capital punishment. But Judge Brown brought me into his office, and he forced me to really think about what was going on in this case. And it's amazing, when crime doesn't affect you, when you're maybe at that 10,000-foot level, and you start thinking about what actually happens, it wasn't an easy process, but I changed the way I felt. And that was because of my personal involvement in this, and how well I knew Charlie and how well I knew his wife. And I told him that, I did believe in it. And we do evolve. I'm not sure if I still believe in it, but when crime affects you personally, the way you think absolutely changes. So Judge Brown, thank you for that very thoughtful moment. And I know Angela Davis, she thanks you too. That was Charlie's wife. She was in the office with us. And Greg was also there, Greg Lasak. So thank you. I'll never forget that. New York is a very different city now compared to when I first joined the transit police way back in 1983, and that's hard to believe. 1983 for me seems like just yesterday. The people in this room this morning are a big part of the reason why, and I see so many of my executive staff here that do such a fantastic job, and some people from the DA's office now and before. Carlos Gomez, my new chief of department, I couldn't be prouder to work with you. Bobby Boyce, thank you for all you do. I think Dermot Shea is in the room. I think I had a Dermot Shea sighting. And what Dermot does on Thursday mornings should never be underestimated. He's the driver of this crime reduction in this city. The man is so focused on what he does, and he cares so much about this city. Dermot, we're lucky to have you. As pillars of the criminal justice system, you've done so much to make where we live and work as safe as it is today. You get it. And what I want is to have all 8.6 million New Yorkers outside of this room feel that too, and to take active roles in getting us there. Because crime fighting, and that's what this is all about, make no mistake about it, fighting crime is what we get paid to do. It's a shared responsibility. Nothing rests on just one agency. No one can do it alone. One group or one person. We all have to have a hand in our success. Witness the Chelsea bombing on my first full day as police commissioner. The assistance we got from the FBI, Bill Sweeney and his people, the ATF, the New York State Troopers is invaluable. No one thought about taking credit. Everybody just wanted to do their best to make sure that we kept the city of its people safe. Our vision for the way forward draws on the lessons of my own 34-year career in law enforcement so far, during which times I've had the privilege to work with some of the sharpest minds in criminal justice. Over the past 22 years since we instituted CompStat, no police agency in America or the world has done a better job of preventing crime and disorder than the NYPD. Serious crimes here have dropped more than 75%, and murders more than 80%, and they continue to go down, as I stated before. And that's while New York City's population rose by more than a fifth, and ridership in our subways nearly doubled. One of the best ways to illustrate our historic drop in crime, I think, is to look at my old training ground, the subway system. Now, on any given weekday, we see an average of 6 million riders and just 6 reported index crimes a day. Let's think about that for a second. That's 1 crime a day per 1 million subway riders. That would have been almost unimaginable in 1983. All across the city now, year after year, we're consistently seeing the lowest robbery, burglary, and auto theft numbers since the 1960s, the lowest murder total since 1957, the year I was born. And we just emerged from the safest summer in more than 20 years. Other benefits from our hard work have been enormous. A thriving economy, a rising population, record numbers of tourists, sustained business investment, rising real estate values. All of it rests on a solid foundation of public safety. Our intention is to keep that foundation strong through the relentless focus on the twin mission of crime fighting and mending relationships between our cops and our communities. While we achieved what many said was unachievable, making New York City the safest big city in America, we also acknowledge we did so sometimes at the expense of vital community support, especially in communities of color, which are often the areas that need our help most. Where partnership should exist, sometimes there is tension. And incidents like what happened last night up in the Bronx certainly don't make it better, they just increase the tension. It's now our goal, our duty, to do all we can do to help heal old wounds, and to gain through partnership a new level of public support and public action that achieves our common mission of public safety. In order to move forward, we have to evolve and come up with new, even better methods of keeping people safe. We put cutting-edge technology in the palm of every officer's hand, spending hundreds of millions of dollars on that technology and other equipment that help us do our jobs more effectively and more safely, and I'd like to thank the Manhattan DA's office for that. And going forward, I know we're going to get the assistance from many other district attorney's officers. We've added new officers, about 1,300 cops, thanks to the mayor and city council for the first time in a dozen years. And for those new cops, we've revised our street-level approach to fighting crime. We used to take officers from fresh out of the academy and deploy them in our busiest precincts, and within those busiest precincts, the busiest sectors, the most crime-ridden sectors. That was a disservice to our new cops that came out of the academy. We put them in a spot, in a situation where they didn't appreciate the precinct, they didn't appreciate the traditions of the precinct. They didn't get to know the community as well as they should have. Impact, it was a good method for crime reduction. It really worked. If you looked at what's happened in this city over those number of years. But it really did a disservice to our new cops. We have a generation of impact cops, and it did a disservice to the community, quite frankly. Those relationships weren't there. They could have been there. The supervisory ratio was way too high. There were no introductions to the people of the community that we took an oath to serve and protect. And that's an oath that we had hired 700 cops last week. And I had an opportunity to talk to them and tell them how important that oath is. You better take it seriously. This is what you came on for. You're a crime fighter. And you can't do that without the community. And I think with impact, I think it did some damage, but we can undo it, and we are undoing it. While that program was effective in reducing crime, I believe it had some unintended consequences, particularly as it pertained to stopping and questioning people on the streets. Sometimes the NYPD fell short of giving our newest members the best formative guidance we could. The FTO program now that we have, if you're a new police officer, you come out of the academy, you work with an FTO, a field training officer. There's 2 recruits assigned to each FTO. We send them to every precinct throughout the city. We send them to every transit district and every housing PSA. They do 2 months of midnights. They do 2 months of day tours and do 2 months of 4 to 12. They get to see what the precinct, district, and PSA is really like and get to appreciate the people that work there and the people that live and work there. So now we're giving our cops all the experience they need right out of the gate and partnering them with veteran officers who can provide context to officers' new environments. We are no longer focused on ever high number of stops, arrests, and summonses. We're actually down in all categories. Instead, we're distinguishing those individuals who are a threat from those who are not, and that's the essence of policing. We're doing this through what we call precision policing. And so much of that has to do with not only Dermot, with Bob Boyce and his Detective Bureau. We incorporated the Organized Crime Control Bureau into our Detective Bureau, so now most of our detectives are working for one chief, and that's the Chief of Detectives, to make sure we all have the same mission, and that's to reduce violence in this city. And we do that through short, medium, and long-term cases, and we're getting better and better at it. And I thank the DA's offices and the U.S. Attorney's offices for all the assistance that they give us in these cases. We fully understand that it's a relatively small percentage of people who commit the majority of the violence in New York City. And that's who we're going after now. And it's an exceedingly effective strategy. In April and June this year, we pre-indicted nearly 73 criminals, took them out of housing developments in Manhattan early in the morning and arrested them, charging them with murder, robbery, shootings, drug dealings, and more. By that afternoon of those takedowns, we were back in those neighborhoods holding community meetings, explaining to the good people who live there and work there why we had been there that morning. We told them exactly who we arrested and told them exactly what those criminals did. And we told those good people they no longer had to be afraid. And thank you, Edna, for that. In ways like that, we began fostering the goodwill we need to secure the willing cooperation of affected communities and to partner with them in reducing crime. The police, more than most, have a profound capacity to affect social change. But to do it, we must seek active and productive engagement on problem solving, both within our ranks and with the public. We're good at it, but I think working with the public, we can be a lot better at it. And that's where our public engagement campaign comes in, co-sponsored by the New York City Police Foundation and ABNY, with the goal of getting cops and community to work in tandem with our partners at the city, state, and federal levels. We are enlisting the business community, grassroots community, clergy, academia, and every other relevant public and private agency to work with us. This is a movement that forges true relationships and will ultimately deliver a city that is safe in every single neighborhood. We don't underestimate the difference even one person can make, and neither should the public. But we need the public to view its police through that lens of trust I've spoken about before. Our neighborhood policing program is helping that become a reality. Now operating in more than half of our commands around the city, neighborhood policing focuses on the most individualized issues that residents and workers face. We did the math yesterday, so neighborhood policing is now covering about 3.8 million out of the 8.6 million people in New York City. We have reorganized our department and now have that same police officer working the same sector every day. They, along with designated neighborhood coordination officers, or NCOs, are intimately getting to know the people who make up those small areas: shopkeepers, residents, young kids, religious leaders, delivery men, doormen, security guards, school teachers, and many more. And through emails, cell phone conversations, and a great deal of good old-fashioned face-to-face conversations, somewhat of a lost art, they're working together to drive down crime and stop disorder before it erupts. In our neighborhood policing commands, we see it every day. In the 3-4 precinct, one of our first pilot commands in Upper Manhattan last month, our NCOs were reviewing a shooting report from earlier in the week when they reached out to one of their community contacts for help and very quickly identified the shooter. In the 7-0 precinct in Brooklyn this month, the NCO was going over video footage from a burglary inside a commercial building. He recognized the suspect from his own dealings in the neighborhood, and the detective squad moved in and locked him up. And PSA 7 in the Bronx in August, NCOs not only arrested a husband who had repeatedly battered his wife, but they helped get her and her child out of the abusive relationship. In the 100th precinct, again, another one of our pilot commands, in Queens earlier this year, our NCOs were playing basketball with local kids in an area of the Rockaways known for its historical ties to gang violence. The NCOs there are making immeasurable inroads with the young people in the neighborhood. They have established lasting personal connections with many of them, and turf conflicts have noticeably begun to ease. The violence out in the Rockaways, while not gone, has definitely gone down. The NCO command is, the neighborhood policing program is our way forward. It's a way to build relationships. We're in the process now of developing surveys that we can send out to the residents of the community so we get feedback, so we know that it's working, so it's not just anecdotal. We're also sending surveys to our police officers who are a huge part of this. I care about many things. I care about our cops. I care about our community. Of course, I care about crime, and without a doubt, I care about counterterrorism. The stories go on, car break-ins thwarted, shootings reduced, loud music turned down, open-air drug dealing gone. The NYPD has reinvented itself. We've redefined what it means to be a New York City cop. And now we're telling the public, here's what you can do to help us. It's my highest priority as police commissioner to foster the respect deserved by every resident and worker in New York City, precinct by precinct, neighborhood by neighborhood, to find our way forward. I know you'll help us in this important work as we keep building a new era of public safety in this great city. Thank you very much and have a great morning. Not getting away so easy. Some Q&A.
Power of arrest. So, as we always do, if I could ask the press to hold back, let our invited guests go first, and just, I think the press knows this, the commissioner is going to do an availability in the back after this. So if you want to ask a few questions, that's fine, but if you would save the bulk of it for the availability, that would be good. You're in control.
Sure, thank you. Come on, there's got to be some questions. Howard.
So it sounds like from the report you just gave us that facial recognition capability on the part of a police officer is a very key element. So that raises two questions. Do we screen for that capability in new officers? Because that's fairly easy to measure. And are we thinking about using big data to match what we're seeing, so we could do it by human skill or we could do it by computer skill, but the results you're having with quickly finding culprits is something I think is a great step forward.
Yeah, and I think it is, and every officer now has access through their smartphone to our domain awareness system. So if you want to know something about a person, a car, a telephone, a location, you go right into the smartphone and you can find that immediately. So that data, all that data that we have is at the hands of every one of our police officers. As far as facial recognition, we're getting better and better at it. I'm not sure if we're using it to screen candidates, but it's probably a good idea. I just had a quick trip out to Adelaide, Australia, and there was a sergeant there from the Northern Territories who gave quite an interesting talk about facial recognition. It used to be 32 measures on the face. It's up to about 800 now. So it's getting better and better. You know, good and bad, good and bad. Sir?
Being that you started in the transit police, my question is, as you know, outside of Manhattan primarily, especially at night, there are many subway stations in the outer boroughs that are particularly desolate. And the Transit Authority established many years ago these congregated waiting areas with signage. And I use the subways quite a bit, and I've seen people use them at night. And the Transit Authority and the MTA have indicated that it's anachronistic because of the vast reductions in crime in the city and in the Transit Authority. My question to you is, why tempt fate? What harm is there in the MTA retaining those congregated waiting areas at the subway stations?
You know, I think it's important wherever you go in the city that although crime is down tremendously, you still have to use your head. So probably not a bad idea. But I had the opportunity to take a subway ride with George Kelling about 2 years ago, 2 summer nights in a row. And George wanted to see the subway 25 years later after he first started to work with Commissioner Bratton, then Chief Bratton. And we took a ride. I know the system pretty well. I took him up to my old command in District 11. And we were on a train going northbound at 167th Street in the Grand Concourse. And there was a woman in the north end of the platform, not a very busy station, talking on her cell phone, and it's certainly something you wouldn't have seen 25 years ago. But no, not a bad idea to stay by the conductor still. But you know, one crime a day. But as I agree, why tempt fate? I agree with you. Sir?
Detective from New York City.
Thank you for everything you've done.
And thank you for what you continue to do. Although major crime is down, which is a relief, we still see the day-to-day quality of life, in my opinion, deteriorating in New York City. For instance, just a couple of weeks ago, I was with my granddaughter, 2 years old, walking along Central Park South across from the Marriott. And there's a gentleman in the middle of the day exposing himself, urinating on the sidewalk, and then the many people that we passed who just decided to put a piece of cardboard down and make it their home. What's being addressed, what is being, is there something in the works that will make the quality of life, I won't call them crimes, but the quality of life situation better in New York?
Well, with quality of life, there's some things you can do and some things you can't do. And if there's someone urinating in the middle of the street, did you call 311 or 911? Okay. All right. It's and this is what I talk about as shared responsibility. I was a precinct commander for 6.5 years. I had the park, I had the 2-5, and I had the 4-4. And if I didn't address quality of life conditions, I wouldn't have been a precinct commander very, very long. So, you know, if you let us know about it, and we do have teams out there, and in Manhattan South especially, with Billy Morris, quality of life is an important component of what they do. And working with the mayor's office, a lot of these issues are not just police. They're a lot bigger than police issues. And we need help from all the agencies within the city of New York. And that's with our neighborhood policing command, being able to contact other agencies and helping us help solve the problem long term is really important. So quality of life to me is still a huge issue, and we take care of it as best we can.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So thank you all so very much. We'll be in touch as we are. We hope to see you on our next event.